Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today I'm with my friend Tiffany Drew.
Hello, it's
Hello.
good to be here. I'm excited.
Thanks for hanging out and talking with me.
Absolutely.
I asked Tiffany to hang out and talk today. Actually, more was an open invitation because I'm trying to figure out depression, suicide. And those are two topics that I don't really relate too well. And I want to be really sensitive about people that are going through that, to not explain it away or just make it seem like it's not something, because it's totally something. And Tiffany reached out and said, "Hey, let's talk."
Yeah. I am more than willing to talk. I am very excited that you put that out there. And I think it's great that you're doing what you're doing, trying to get everybody's stories and really get an understanding of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you and I go back, I guess I can qualify it and say several years now.
Several. Yes, absolutely.
Gosh, because it's 2021. When did we meet? Like 2015?
Right around 2014, 2013, maybe even, because I was still in school.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we met through Haynes Mall there.
Yeah, it was one of those relationships where it's like, hey, we both work in the same place. We see each other every single day, because
Right.
I would go to Tiffany and get tea. And
Yes.
did you work somewhere else also?
No, just Tivana.
Huh. Because we had Tiffany, we had Starbucks, we had the Piercing Pagoda.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like
That was our little
the
clique.
mall crew. Yeah.
Yep.
it was so cool. But yeah, we go back several years. But you do something a little bit different now.
I do. So my official title is COVID Data Coordinator for Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. And that's just...
She's an actual fact checker.
I am. That's just a fancy way of saying I look at a lot of numbers all day, something I never thought I would do. If you asked fifth grade Tiffany, would she be doing math every day? She would have said, absolutely not. But here I am, and I actually enjoy what I do. I love finding patterns and things, and I hate that it's dealing with kids, but it's still exciting to try to keep them safe.
Yeah.
That's the goal, is to keep everybody safe.
Yeah, so you do data. What's your religious background? Are you Christian, atheistic, agnostic?
So religious, I grew up in a very Christian household. I grew up Moravian.
Mm-hmm.
As far as where I'm at currently, it's a little complicated. It's one of those things where I do still have a lot of the core beliefs. I do still believe in Jesus, and I think he was a great guy. But as far as, going to church or like really subscribing, I guess, to Christianity at the moment, I would consider myself more spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that with the LGBTQ background, I kind of felt forced away from the church for a while.
Yeah.
So trying to get to a healthy place spiritually where I could potentially get back into it is kind of where I'm at.
Gotcha. Cool. So the topic today is depression and suicide.
Yes.
I guess I want to start at ground zero. So when you were little Tiffany, thinking about playing the flute,
Yes,
and doing all that stuff, where did it all begin for you?
So when it really began for me was when I was around 8th grade.
Oh gosh, middle school.
Yep.
Where'd you go to middle school?
Ledford Middle School.
Oh, that's right. Ledford High, Ledford
Yeah.
Middle. Yeah.
The same thing. But so that's where it started. My mom and my stepdad at the time went through a divorce, and my stepdad was kind of like my real dad almost. Like he filled that spot perfectly. So it was really tough for me, and that's when I first started battling depression. We tried counseling, and it was one of those things that, yeah, I had all these thoughts and I had suicidal ideations and stuff, but I just kind of lied to get out of it because, yes, and it was unfortunately one of those counselors that the parent was present. So in front of my mom.
So there was that pressure to be something.
Exactly. I'm not going to say in front of my mom, yes, I want to, commit suicide. Like, I didn't want to admit that to her. So.
Well, it's tough too, because I had a family member do that, and I think they were like 12, around the same age.
Yeah.
And they got committed to, not Brenner. There's some, it's almost like a holding center, where a detainment center for youths or something.
Right.
It sucks.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't want to end up somewhere like that. I didn't want to, worry my mom mainly. because right around that time too is when I first started self-harming.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things where I told a teacher I trusted about it, and they're required to report that. And because of my age, instead of like, just me working through it with a counselor, they had to report it to my mother.
Mm-hmm.
So we had that factor in there too. And I mean, I just remember her crying and being upset, and she felt like a failure because I felt the way I did. And that just kind of, I know she wasn't trying to, but that kind of guilted me into keeping everything more of a secret.
Yeah. So you were about 12 or 13 when all this
Right
stuff
around
happened. And you knew that you had suicidal tendencies and thoughts. Did you know why you had them specifically?
I did not. I had no clue. What I assumed and what kind of my mother and everyone assumed was the divorce was causing it. Later, as life continued, I did find out, as we know, certain mental disorders are genetic, like depression, and my whole family, everyone struggles with it. So I guess it was just kind of that one moment was the catalyst, so to speak, in kicking off that fun disorder.
Yeah.
But
So these were pretty formative years: eighth grade,
yes.
ninth grade, 11th grade, and 10th. Oh, I missed 10th, but I remember for me going through those grades, I've never struggled, like truly struggled with depression. Never thought about suicide aside from just the invasive thoughts that we all have.
Right.
Excuse me. So like just going through those formative years on their own, it was tough enough. Like, oh, I don't have the same clothes the other kids have. My life situation, like where I live, is not what I think all the other kids have the disprivilege of living. And so that's tough enough. I can't imagine going through it, having these thoughts like, oh, I want to end my life, and not really knowing why. Did you feel separated from other people?
Absolutely. I mean, I felt really alone because, this was also before the time of like as many people speaking out on social media and the internet. So it's not like, I could just log online, do a quick Google or YouTube search and see people who were feeling the same way.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. The internet is so pervasive now. I forgot that it wasn't around at one point.
It was not. So, like there was no one I could really look to as someone who felt like me. I just knew that all the people around me didn't feel the way I felt or didn't present the way that they felt the way I felt. So I just felt like, I was alone in it. Something was wrong with me. Why do I feel this way? Like, why am I reacting this way? I mean, as far as self-harm, like I didn't even know why I was doing it. I just knew I was doing it.
When you say self-harm, if I can pursue that a little bit more,
Yeah.
what exactly do you mean? And how did that start?
It was just cutting. It started, I don't really know why I started it. And it wasn't like, I had like any kind of social media influence. Like, it was just something I came up with.
So you just did it one day and you're like, this feels good in a certain kind of way?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that is why I did it, or what happened. And, it's one of those things that once again, through therapy and stuff, I've learned that it was kind of a control mechanism. That I felt like life was kind of out of control, situations were out of my control, and it was something I could do that I could control. Like, I could control this pain upon myself. Like, it was, I mean, that was a big thing for me, was control. Like, yeah, I could control that.
So, you started cutting, and, after the fact, you look back and you found out that it was control. When you had that epiphany, was that a situation where you had the cutting thing under control?
Right, yeah.
Did you have it under control at the time, or was it a thing of, okay, I need to give up control in this area? When did you stop cutting?
So, when I stopped like really doing it was probably around my seniorish year of high school. So it's something that continued for years. And then you unfortunately get more creative where you put it, just because you don't want people to notice it. Like, you can only do it on your arms for so long. But I started going to therapy again once I was in college. Because that's when I continued to notice that, like, okay, like, it's not like just the divorce that has caused this. Like, something is clearly wrong. I still feel this way and have for years. But it's one of those things that, like, you can manage it and you can control it, but it's something you actively have to do. Like, I know that I'm in a very good place now, and now it doesn't, through all my work, it doesn't even, cross my mind as easily. But especially, like, I can say that after I graduated college, even still then, there were a few, I guess, slip up moments where I was triggered by something and it just was the first thing I fell back on, without even thinking about it. And by then I knew it was a control thing, but it would just kind of happen. And then I would look back and be like, oh, well, this is a kind of an indicator that things are getting out of control again. I need to get a handle on that. So it became kind of more of a warning.
Yeah. So when you were in 8th grade and all this stuff was happening and you were having these thoughts of suicide, what were the thoughts exactly? Were they just cursory? Oh, I think it might be better if I'm not here. Or did you actually daydream about how you would do it? What exactly was it?
So when it was happening in 8th grade, it was more of it would just be better if I wasn't here. I'm kind of in the way. Like, life just hurts too much. Around that age, I had the thoughts, but I didn't have a kind of a plan, so to speak. That didn't happen until years later. It was once again after I graduated college that's when I started having the ideas again. But this time I had like a method a day. I had letters written. Like, I was ready to go, so to speak.
Man, I can't imagine. So as you were doing that, deciding the day, figuring out the how, writing the letters, what was going through your mind?
It was just that, things would be better without me. And that I just can't do this anymore. Like, I can't take it anymore. I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Like, it's just better for me to step out of the picture. And it would, kind of save everyone, including myself, some heartache in the end.
Gosh. I'm just trying to process that. Because I wrote down, where was hope in all this? And I know hope is such a weird word, especially to people that don't have it.
Right.
Or because it's one of those things where it's fleeting. It's like you can't actually tangibly grab it.
Right.
It's something that is for the future.
Yes.
You're never going to be in a present place where, oh, this is hope right now. It's like, no, in 5 seconds, in 2 days, in 10 years, and kind of dreaming what that's going to be like in a positive fashion, because we were talking downstairs with Alyssa. Hey, Alyssa. About hope and just thinking about tomorrow and looking down the road, and how for some of us that's not a normal everyday thing.
Right. It is not.
Yeah. So, like, would you talk about that for a second? From the position of adolescent Tiffany into young adult Tiffany.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of those things that, like, depression, I mean, everybody's story is different, but for me, mine wasn't always a constant. It kind of ebbed and flowed. So there would be some days that I did have that hope, and I had, what I wanted to do with the future, and I had, things in mind, like, I want to graduate college, I want a family, like, I want the quote unquote American dream, 2.5 kids, white picket fence. And then, the next day it would just be like, I am worth nothing. So there were some days of hope. It wasn't all completely, doom and gloom. But when you're in the moment, when you're in that depressive mind frame, all the thoughts of hope you had originally had just kind of don't mean anything anymore. Like, so the hope vanishes.
Yeah, I guess it's akin to somebody saying, okay, I'm going to go to med school for several years and then getting halfway through and thinking, man, why am I doing this?
Exactly. Like exactly like that. And then, you know, a week or two later, they're like, "Oh man, this is great. Like I know why I'm here. This is the
Hmm.
bomb." And then a little bit more time goes by and they're like, "Why did I do this?"
Yeah. Um, so you were in middle school through high school, and then around that time, you stopped cutting, and then you became an adult. You got your
Mhm.
license. Did you move out immediately?
I did. I went straight from living with my parents to college living in the dorms. I would come home during the summer, but there were 2 summers that I stayed with other people because I didn't really want to come home, so to speak. I'd gotten used to a certain level of freedom
Hmm.
and, once again, control over myself and, actively giving that up. No. So,
Do you feel like the transition from adolescenthood to young adulthood, having the freedoms of where you live, what you say, what you do, what you wear, what you eat, what you think, do you think that helped or hindered all of this for you?
I I don't think it hmm I don't think it made too much of a difference, if that makes sense. Because, I trying to think of how to say it. I mean, yes, I had more control of myself technically, but still the things that felt out of control with my life, I mean, I couldn't control those. And that's kind of what started the whole self-harm thing to begin with is, stuff that was without of my control that I couldn't control, trying to just grasp something I could.
Yeah.
So, I mean, hmm, it kind of did, but didn't make a difference. It did allow me to finally start exploring my mental health more.
Hmm.
Um, and it was a decision I made versus something that was kind of forced upon me. Like when I went to therapy the first time, it was like I was forced into it. Like I was told you were going to therapy, and until you do not feel like doing this anymore, you will be in therapy.
Yeah.
But once I finally got the control of myself and all of that, I made the choice. And that's when things started to get better. It's because I chose that, like, I want to be better. Like, I want to get to a better mind frame.
Hmm. That's so cool because um, I know I was very rebellious as a kid, but in a way that was also submissive. I was like, I'm rebellious, but I'm not going to tell you about it.
Right. Yep.
And
Absolutely.
then like I'd have an argument with my parents, and yeah, I'm so sorry, and they'd shut the door and turn it and just through the door. Yeah,
Right.
um,
Yep.
just the subversive mentality that kids can have. Um, but we all go through these things where there's an expected change, and we change because we have to.
Right.
But
Exactly.
then when you actually have the freedom, it's like, what are you actually going to do? And it's so cool watching people. I missed the table there. It's so cool watching people, specifically my own life, go through these seasons where something that I was forced to change and there was an expectation for me to change in the past, I'm now doing of my own free will, and how much of a heart change that is instead of a head change. It's no longer mechanical.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know for me, what really motivated me to change was the people around me. They weren't necessarily forcing me into it or anything like that, but now I was starting to notice how I was affecting them. And so that's what actually led me to getting the therapy, to talking to a mental health professional, is I was noticing how I was affecting the people in my life. So for me, it was kind of like for the first time I had this, oh, like what I'm doing not only affects Tiffany, it affects, the people closest to me, and they're the
Oof.
people like I have depression, but I also have
Mm-hmm.
bipolar, and those were the people I was closest to, the people you never want to hurt, were the people who my guard was down enough around that unfortunately were the people who got hit by my mood swings and the people who had to watch my depression more. And for me it was just that
Mm-hmm.
I can't actively keep hurting someone So that's what led to me getting the help. Like I wanted to be better for someone else, but then as I got into it, it turned into more of a I want to be better for me. Like I started to realize that I deserved to feel better. I deserved to not struggle with these thoughts every day, to go through what I'm going through. So it started as kind of a for others and then became a for me as I started to get healthier.
Yeah. Um, that's also very poignant to bring up because you said, I wanted to get better for me. And I think when you're in when you're in the trenches of all this stuff, I think it's really difficult because I've been in periods of my life where I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm not worth it.
Right.
I'm not worth friends. I'm not worth a relationship. I'm not worth a job that pays me well or that gives me fulfillment. I'm not worth this nice pair of shoes or whatever. Now you can go too far on the other side of things too, where it's
right.
like, I deserve this, the whole privileged
Yep.
mindset. But what do you think was one of the big catalysts for you transitioning from control and I'm not worth it and I don't really have a purpose to, oh, well, I have a reason that's other people. Oh, wait. I'm valuable. Like what were the catalysts through those 3 steps or 2 steps?
Yeah. So for me, it was therapy. Like I'm not gonna lie, that's really therapy and medication are the 2 things that really saved me.
Yeah.
Personally, I am a full believer in medicines. I think that once again, everybody's different. Everybody has their own journey, but I know for me, it was literally a lifesaver. Mm-hmm. And so the mind switch change from I'm doing this for everyone else to I'm doing this for me happened through therapy. Like as I started to get better, so to speak, as I started to realize my self-worth more. Mm-hmm. So as, I started working on things, I started to realize my self-worth. And then that's when it became okay, like this is for Tiffany. Like she doesn't deserve to hurt anymore. Like she doesn't deserve to, be laying on the bathroom floor crying. Like she deserves better than that.
Do you have a specific moment where you could actually slap a label on it that would be an epiphany?
I guess
a Tiffany epiphany.
A Tiffany epiphany. There was one moment where it was one of those I was really down situations and I had the thoughts of self-harm again, and I remember just in that moment saying no. Like no, like this is not good for me. Like this is mm-hmm. I deserve better than hurting myself. Yeah. Like, so that was the moment. It was shortly after, the whole like suicide plan and almost attempt happened. Yeah. I think a big thing too is after my almost attempt. I'm going to say almost just because I didn't fully go through with it. I didn't make an active attempt. I did, talk to mental health professionals again, and they did make some medication changes. And so that really also helped my way of thinking. So, through the medication, through the therapy, that's how I hit that moment where I was sitting there, ready to fall back into this behavior. And I was like, no. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah.
So you said that at one point you all of this was kind of a manufactured change. There was an expectation. There were people that wanted you to change. And then you got to a place where it's like, okay, I should change for these reasons. And I kind of have a stake in this where I can choose. But now it's a heart change. It's for me. Did you ever feel a level of condemnation about being depressed or suicide where it's like, I have to change this, and if I don't, I'm a bad person?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It goes back to, something we were kind of talking over coffee about was that, there are so many people who like to say that people who are considering suicide are selfish. Like, and I definitely have that, like, oh, like I'm a selfish person. How can I do that to people around me? How can I
Which just adds a layer to the I'm not worth it. I don't
Right.
deserve to be here. It'd just be better if I'm gone.
Exactly, because it's like, well, if I'm, that bad of a person that I'm even considering this, like maybe things would be better without me.
Yeah.
Like maybe I'm actually just a trash human.
Mm-hmm. So help me understand the translation
Yeah.
from how you went from condemnation about wanting to change to a conviction. And guys, just for the sake of clarity and for definition, the way I view conviction is not like you feel convicted like you shouldn't do. Like conviction is a heart change where you acknowledge, okay, it's my personal responsibility to do this, not from a place of I have to, but I get the option to because XYZ.
Right. I mean, it was just once again like the change from feeling like I had to feeling like I wanted to. Just kind of, came through the therapy, came through working through everything with a professional. That really made the difference to have someone who kind of, instead of saying, fix this, just stop thinking that way. Like someone who walked through it with me.
Yeah.
Who was like, I get why you're struggling. Like, let's move forward together. And that took me, made me feel like, not that someone was looking down on me saying, you must fix this. Like, this is wrong. But it was someone who was like taking a guiding hand and saying like, okay, let's work through this. And that got me having a support system that wasn't pressuring and was understanding, but still, motivating me. Like, because there's a difference between being supporting and motivating versus just being enabling.
Mm-hmm.
So having someone who like walked through it, took my hand, but still made sure we kept moving forward, that took me from the condemnation to conviction to, yeah, I really want to do this. Like they're kind of showing me that I'm not alone and that I can do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When did you first acknowledge that there were other people that were going through this?
It actually was around the time that it was through college, and with college being kind of a melting pot of different types of people, I wasn't surrounded by the same type of people every day, that I felt like, like I went to a very, I'm just going to say rich high school. Like everyone around me lived kind of a different reality than I did. Like everyone,
they lived an Instagram life.
They did. They lived an Instagram life. They had a lot more money. They had what appeared to be everything perfect, like everything.
Oh, girl, you're preaching to the choir here.
Right,
Same situation.
Yes.
Davie High School.
Woo! But it was like the same thing. It was like, I was living around all these people who just seemed to have all their stuff together, were that picture perfect stereotype of a high schooler. And so once I got to college and started seeing people who looked a little more like me and like talking to them and people who felt like me, that's when, I really started to acknowledge like, oh, like there are other people out there who look this way, feel this way, and I'm not alone in this. And once again, that's kind of what kind of led me to finding some help, was like other people being like, hey, I did this. It really helped me. You're telling me you feel this way and you're seeing how this is affecting people around you. Here are some steps you could possibly take. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, okay. So for the first time, it seemed like there was actually a solution to it versus just wallowing in it forever.
Yeah. So and I'm making an assumption when I say this,
Go
but
ahead.
When did you finally start feeling normal?
When I started feeling normal was, so the big suicidal moment happened around the 2015 area.
Oh gosh, like similar to when we met.
Yeah.
Dang.
So it happened right in that area.
You saw me and you're like, I shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I was like, you know what, Tim's not worth it. but yeah, so I started feeling normal probably like a year or two later. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, another layer on top of this is not only am I dealing with, mental side effects of depression and bipolar disorder, but I also had a lot of physical health problems, which did not help and also led to that feeling of worthlessness.
Yeah.
So right around when I started taking charge of my physical health, was also when my mental health improved drastically and I started to feel a little more quote unquote normal. Um, obviously between here and then, because, depression and recovery is not a linear path. Like there will be,
Oh, that's so good. Could you say that again?
yeah, depression and recovery is not a linear path.
Ooh, that's so good.
Yeah, like there will be, stumbles. There will be a little bit of regression from time to time, but that does not mean that you are not worth it. And that does not mean that you have failed. Um, so I mean, between then of when I started to feel quote unquote normal and now, yeah, there were some stumbles and there were some trips, but the main thing is because of where I was, I felt like I could get through it and I was worth getting through it. And that's what has led to me being in a healthier mental place.
Mm-hmm. So let's back up for a second. You
All
said
right.
that you were at a place where you were going to do it.
Yep.
You wrote the letters.
I was
You had
there.
a plan. You had a time.
I did.
Um, Talk to me about the day where you decided, okay, this is not my plan. What specifically was it that inspired you to put them away, to get help? Would you just walk me through that day?
Yeah. So that particular day, and trigger warning for anyone, this is me talking about a plan. So I had decided that I was going to end it all through self-harm. And, that morning I wrote out all of my letters telling everybody, don't blame yourself. There's nothing you could have done. This is all me. And I, once again, was trying to make things easier on other people. So I was like, okay, I'm going to just set up this little tote. I'm going to lay on the couch, put my arm over the tote. And then, that way there's not a big cleanup and all this stuff. And as I sat down and had everything set out, there was a moment where I was like, okay, I'm going to make one last attempt to reach out to someone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually, I don't know if she knows this, but it was a moment where I texted Alyssa. We weren't together at the time, and we had a pretty bad falling out, which was a lot of my fault. So it was just kind of a last ditch effort. There was something inside of me that wasn't sure still. Like 99% of me was sure, but there was that 1% little voice that was like, just try this one thing. Just see if it works. And lucky for me, she responded. And, we were talking and she could tell I was in a bad place. And so she dropped what she was doing and came over. And that is what stopped me, is that she and a couple other of my friends came with her, and, having those people respond immediately, show me they care like that stopped it. And, from there, they kind of talked me down, helped me put everything away. And that was kind of once again, an epiphany moment of, oh, like there are people who care. Like someone would have actually noticed that I was gone and it would have affected them. Like I really need to get a handle on this.
That's so cool. And yeah, I like that. And it also gives me a little bit of anxiety because just thinking about all the people I've encountered. I'm 37 now, and tons of we're about to have our 20th high school reunion. That's insane, But just looking back, there's a lot of people that I went to school with who have died. Some of them to suicide, some of them to just circumstances. And just thinking, when was the last time I saw them? What was going through my head? Was I angry at them? Was I happy with them? Was I ambivalent towards them? Was I apathetic towards them? Whatever, and just thinking, like, on one hand, I don't want to go around walking on eggshells with these people that, especially because we talked about a couple of these, that have a plan and a time frame, and I know that are in a difficult spot. It's tough to not walk around on eggshells thinking that I'm responsible for them. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge that God has put me in specific places at a specific time to be obedient to loving the same people that he loves. and I want to be cognizant of that too. What would be your advice to somebody who is on the outskirts, looking in, trying to navigate that?
Yes. Well, the first thing I want to say is no matter what happens, no matter what that person does, it is not your fault. It is not your fault. Do not sit and question, what if I had done this differently? What if I had not gotten mad at them over this? Like, it's not your fault. It is something that, they're going to do regardless. But my advice would be to just listen. If they are giving off signs, if they are explicitly saying things, just try to be there for them. Also, like you were saying about eggshells, like at the same time that you're there for them and the same time you're listening and loving them, you can still hold them accountable for things. Like if there is something they have done that deserves a little bit of repercussions to it, like don't just because they're depressed, let them, I guess for lack of a better term, get away with mistreating you. But I mean, the main advice I have is just to listen, to be there. If you do know that they are planning on something and you can't get there, like, she was able to get there for me. We were close. But, if you can't physically get there and something is about to happen, don't be afraid to contact someone of authority. It is better for someone else to show up and then potentially, having to do a short behavioral stint somewhere than for them to be gone.
Yeah, just thinking about that specifically, in my world, because my wife is a nurse, her whole family's doctors. I do stuff that's closer to the counseling field.
Right.
There's a level of expectation where if somebody has a plan and somebody has a date and their intention is to do it, legally you're required to take action. Where do you think that line is?
My line, or what I think the line is whether it is a plan in the future or whether it is immediate danger. If they're like, I have a plan 2 weeks from now, like, okay, maybe there are some steps in between now and then that can be taken. Maybe there is some kind of counseling we can get them into. Maybe there's something we can do. Like right now we're not in emergency mode, we're in preventative mode.
Yeah.
But if it comes down to like, hey, I'm about to do this right now, that is when I think that line has been crossed and that immediate action should be taken. Like, cause I know with like therapy and stuff, one of the questions they'll directly ask you is like, they'll ask like, do you have a plan to harm yourself? And if you're like, sure. And if they're like, well, do you plan on going through with it? Like, is this a plan you're planning on acting upon? If you're like, well, not for a little while, like they might try to talk to you more. But if you're like, yes, like I'm doing this, it is about to happen. Like that's when, actions need to be taken.
Do you think it's worthwhile for somebody to go through the questioning steps like that? Do you have a plan? Do you have a date? When are you actually going to do this? Do you think it's necessary, and do you think it's effective to just...
Yeah, I do. And I mean, it's one of those things where someone could have a plan, a date that's like, 3 weeks out from now, and then something happened and trigger it, and maybe it does come sooner. But I do think that from a, for lack of a better word, like legal standpoint or like personal responsibility standpoint, it is good to ask them these things. Because, some people might have a far away date as kind of like what we were discussing earlier, as like an end goal, as like if I can work towards this, at least everything doesn't seem so bad until then. But I think it's definitely worth it to question them and especially find out if they have the plan. Like, cause intrusive thoughts happen from time to time. I mean, even if you're mentally healthy, they'll happen. Like, what if I just like bloop in front of this car?
We were walking, we went to Pilot Mountain and we were on the trail, and I always have thoughts like, I wonder what if I just push my wife over the side?
Right.
Or like, what if I just push this person in front of I always have thoughts like that.
Yeah. And it's like, you're sitting there like, oh no, like I just thought that.
Tim is not a sociopath, by the way, just saying. Or
maybe.
I'm not a path. But that's really good. So I want to touch on something else that we hinted at earlier.
Totally.
And you said that you believe in Jesus.
Yes.
But there is some hurt between the community and certain beliefs and stuff. I don't want to touch on that specifically, but your relationship with Jesus, like I know my thoughts on this, but coming from somebody who's walked through depression and suicide and had a day, like
right.
I've never had a day, but you've had a day. Would you talk to me about like your relationship with Jesus before that, during that, and now after the fact?
Yeah. Before that, and I mean, even going back to the 8th grade level, before that, it was like Jesus was used against me. Mm-hmm. It was as we talked about, like, well, God gave you this life. Why are you trying to end it? Like, you should be happy that you've lived another day. Like, some people don't get this day. Like, oh, just go pray about it. Like, you obviously aren't convicted enough in your faith. Like, if you're considering this. There were things like that. And it was hard for me too, being in a religious household. Like, luckily, my mother also struggled. Well, luckily is, iffy word, but she could kind of empathize with the depression aspect of it. But there was still that, kind of religious expectation of, like, you should be grateful to be here type thing. As far as during the whole situation, there really wasn't much of a relationship at all. Like, I just felt that it was too hopeless, so to speak, at that point. Like, I felt like I had been abandoned. And, like, hey, everybody keeps telling me I'm going to hell anyway for being gay. Like, what's one more sin, So it's because I heard that a lot too. Like, suicide is a sin, like, immediately straight to hell. So it was kind of like, what's one more?
Yeah. Now, after the fact, looking back on it, and just once again, for clarification, guys, when I say Jesus, I don't mean specifically Christianity, because today in our world, Christianity means so much beyond what it actually is. Yes. What I mean by Christianity is a relationship with Jesus where we allow him to take us from unhealthy to healthy, regardless of how long it takes, regardless to whether or not we say, you know what, I submit, or, you know what, I know better than you, Jesus, because we all do that, So when I say Christianity, I mean specifically a relationship with Jesus where we include him in our lifestyle, not in a just raising my hands on Sundays and paying my tithes. I'm talking like, Jesus, like, what do you see about me right now? Like, how do you feel about me? What are you trying to teach me? What is my role in this? How do you love me? That's what I'm talking about. So where you're at with that now?
So where I'm at with that now is, because of the struggling with Christianity thing, and the two do get tied together, it's kind of in a weird spot. I'm definitely in a situation now where I recognize Jesus as a very nice, caring, compassionate guy. And I really wish that the people who, not everybody, but I really wish some of the people who claim to follow him would actually act more like him. Like, I saw a thing online and it was like, why are people trying to sit at tables that Jesus would have flipped? And I really think that, that seeing other people who claim to have this relationship and seeing how they act has kind of shaken me a little bit, so to speak, as far as building a relationship, because it's like, well, I mean, if that's how you're going to act when you have one, like, oh goodness, like, am I going to start looking down on all these people? But I mean, I'm at a point where, as a person, like, seeing Jesus as a person, like, I really think he was a great person, and I am not opposed to more of a personal relationship again. It's just working through that quote unquote religious trauma. to get back to that point where it becomes one that is healthy and chosen versus one just made out of fear. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. You said something earlier. You said when you were in the midst of all this, when high school, middle school, and everything, it was more a position of take control. I can't control my circumstances, and guys, we've all been there because we've all at one point not had licenses. At one point we did, and if you're that young, I feel your pain. You're stuck at home. You couldn't control what you ate, what your room looked like. Like growing up, I lived in a single wide trailer. Not that there's anything wrong with that,
Right.
but I remember there was a situation where I wanted to have some friends over. And my parents felt weird about that because of the social dogma that people who live in trailers are lesser than white trash type, whatever.
I grew up in that environment too, so I get it.
Yep. And I was having a conversation with my dad, and I said, Dad, we don't even have a deck on our, from my small limited worldview, how can I improve this? Oh, a deck, from a 12-year-old kid. Sure. And I remember my dad took all the money out of his pocket and he was frustrated and he threw it at me and he's like, this is all I have. You go do it. And I know that he was just speaking because he was an orphan growing up and he was just doing his best to the extent that he knew. And Dad, I really appreciate you for that. And I'm sorry that I wasn't so thankful back then. But looking at that back then, it's like, I just wanted to control what I can control and I wanted to take. It was all about me because when you're a kid, man, all you think about is what's happening to you, not what you can give. Very few have the emotional and the maturity capacity to give. But then you said what changed for you and where you started taking personal responsibilities, where you understood that there was a purpose in your life to give to the people around you. And then you said what was previously a manufactured decision of behavior is now a heart change of behavior. So basically what I'm putting together, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. Back then you said my take mentality was more manufactured as far as like getting to a place that's healthy. But now that I'm learning to give to people around me and I have a purpose to give to those and I see value in what I'm doing with them, it seems like that was one of the secret sauce pieces that changed everything for you.
Absolutely. Like going more from that take, try to mend myself as much as possible to let me see what I can give to those around me and then kind of healing myself through that. Like that was a big thing.
Yeah. My mentor and also another guy, my pastor, always talks about you can't give something away unless you have ownership of it. Like if I came to your house and I picked up a book and I gave it to somebody, it's not my book. I don't have the right to give that away. But it seems like at one point you took ownership over what you needed to take ownership over. You took personal responsibility and you decided, okay, I'm going to give this. And hence why you're talking about this right now. I think it's so cool. I think it's going to help a lot of people. But from my perspective on this, coming from a place of hope, like I look at my life and I look at what I'm doing and I always think, okay, there's something good around the corner. There's somebody that needs to hear who Jesus is, not from a position of you need to change your lifestyle,
right?
But you need to feel the love that I've received. And I think it's so cool that you've received love from people when you needed it, and it's overflowing in ways that help other people.
Yeah.
Do you think that without relationship with other people, especially healthy people that were there for you, do you think you could have gotten to the other side of it?
No, I don't. I think had I continued to feel alone, had I not had the support of people around me, I would not have made it without feeling like I was loved and worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can say that if I continued to try to struggle through it alone, I wouldn't have made it. And that was kind of a big thing for me too, was because as we've seen through my past, I have a thing about control and I like to be in control of situations. I like to be in control of myself, but kind of giving up that control of self and allowing myself to be vulnerable to other people, that was huge. Like I went from saying like, yeah, I don't need anybody else, I should never need anybody else, to recognizing that sometimes it is okay to lean on other people and to have them, as a support system. But yeah, I feel like had I not done that, had I continued to just keep everything inside and struggle alone, like, no, I wouldn't have gotten through it.
It sounds like our conversation earlier when I was telling you about that person. I don't need anybody.
Yeah.
It's so crazy how it lines up. Now, I know some of you, if you're considering suicide or dealing with depression and stuff, you'll hear what we just talked about just now and think, man, I don't have a support network. I don't have people. And honestly, it might be difficult to have hope that you ever will, especially if you've got a series of hurt, trauma, just crappy people, not crappy people who have been crappy to you. What would your advice be to those people if they think, I don't have community and I know I need community, but I don't believe I can ever have community?
So my advice, also, that really kind of relates to me as far as not having community, because I was that person who, because I had friends, but I didn't really have a community of people. I didn't have like the best friend that everyone had, that like, oh, I've got my ride or die. I didn't have that. But as far as finding your community of people, my advice would be first to try to find if you can, I know it's not feasible for everyone, but try to find a professional person to reach out to. And as you start kind of healing yourself, making those connections with people, building that community becomes easier. Like sometimes, that first person that you really can trust is someone you're paying. So, I mean, and also we put such a huge emphasis on like people in your community being physically around you. Like you can have, especially now, like you can have an online community of support. And there are a lot of resources out there. There are a lot of free resources out there. Because I know like our healthcare system does give some people an advantage over others. And I can say that I was very lucky and privileged to have been able to afford the healthcare I got, the mental health care. But there are a lot of resources out there that you can build that community. You can find people who can relate to you. It doesn't matter that they're not physically in the same geographical area as you. Like you can still build that community of people who will support you. There are people out there like you. There are people that will support you. And, as cliche as it sounds, it does get better. Like if you keep fighting, it does get better. Mm-hmm. Like you will get to that point. Just, don't give up just yet. Reach out.
Yeah. Now here's a very prudent question. If you're seeking community and you've never had healthy community before, kind of like my journey through food, I grew up drinking nothing but soda. That was modeled for me. We put soda in our baby bottles when we were kids, learning to drink water and learning whatever the heck quinoa is and stuff. When I transitioning my food habits to something that's healthy was trial and error. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of things that I ate that I thought were healthy, like those naked juice things.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
They've got so much freaking sugar in them. They're not healthy at all. But what would your advice be to somebody seeking community in discerning what's actually supportive and healthy and what's enabling? Because they can look very similar.
They can, and that is tricky. And as someone who also had to learn what a good community was, once again, I would say that the best way to learn to create a community is to reach out to those resources that have people who are on their journey going towards a positive place. And there are people out there, and I'm sure I can at some point send him a list and we can get that going. But try to find that community that doesn't just accept your behaviors, but also tries to motivate you to get better. Like we were talking about earlier, someone who is willing to take your hand and walk with you through the trenches, but at the same time you are walking forward. So try to find that community that doesn't just go, oh, you're depressed? That's great. I'm depressed too. And then just kind of let you sit in it. Mm-hmm. and kind of feed it and almost make it worse. Like, you don't want someone who's constantly triggering you every day. So someone who is gonna be like, yeah, I'm depressed too. It super sucks. Let's get through this together. Like, let's go.
Yeah, and you got to be careful of confirmation bias and echo chambers too, because especially if you're in my niches, I don't even know, my social groups or whatever, the online gaming community, we can think that we're helping when we're actually enabling. So I guess a good litmus test for that, guys, is, are your group of friends, do they focus on hope? Do they focus on the good? Do they focus on what can be and not what needs to change, and what the whole social justice, virtue signaling? Be very conscious of that. Because there's a difference between friends and community. A community should always take you about 10 to 20% outside of your comfort zone as far as pushing you to exceed and pushing you to excel, challenging you to a higher standard. If you're in a group of people that do not challenge you to a higher standard, and if you're not doing that to them, they may just be friends, and it may just be laterally unhealthy. But, scripturally, something that I always think about when I think about my friends, there's that scripture that says, outdo one another in honor. And what I think about that, it's like, Tiffany, you said this thing earlier, and that's not really who you are. And I'm going to challenge you to have a higher standard, because, you're better than that. Not, hey, you piece of crap, you said that thing, you're a piece of crap.
Right.
Or, hey, let's trash talk this person.
Right, yeah.
So if you're in a group and people are just making fun of suicide and just like, oh yeah, let's off ourselves, let's kill I'd be very careful with that. That might not be where you want to go. That's just like me saying, I want to change my eating habits, yet I'm just going to shop at Walmart and focus on the candy aisle and get stuff with lots of saturated fat and whatever. It's like, no, I need to make better decisions about where I put myself.
Right. Definitely. And I mean, as someone who, we were talking about this earlier, uses humor to deflect. I am also bad at that. I'll admit it. I will make my little jokes, but it's good to have those people who, for a split second there will be like, haha, but seriously. Like, it kind of depends on where the conversation leads from there, because, like, sometimes humor is a good medicine and you can make a quick joke about it, but you need to have those people in your life that are like, okay, so now that we've laughed about it, are you really feeling this way? Like, or was that just, humor deflection? Like, how are you actually feeling? And let's talk about it. Mm-hmm. So, you can joke around with people, you can find things funny, but it all just depends on where it leads. Mm-hmm. And whether it leads to just, more joking about it, not taking it seriously, or, hey friend, you all right? Like, you made that joke and yeah, that's funny, but you okay? Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. And guys, one last nugget I want to leave with you. That's something that I've personally learned, because all I can teach from, I guess if you call this teaching, is what I've learned and how I failed. I think in the past, especially with stuff like this, I've tried to explain things away because I don't feel it, you shouldn't feel it. I do that with my wife all the time. Why are you feeling these emotions? Just put them away. I don't feel that way. Just let's look at this logically. Logically, right. You shouldn't end your life because A, B, and C. Logically, you shouldn't feel depressed because of A, B, and C. I don't feel that. I don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't, because you feel it and I don't, it doesn't exist. Right? I think, and I referenced this on a previous talk, but the movie Inside Out, there's a character named Sadness, and Sadness did something that joy could not. Mm-hmm. And that's just exist without trying to fix. And I think that's so important. That's a hard life lesson, especially if you're a guy in a relationship who thinks that you got it all figured out. Or if you're a friend in the relationship that thinks you know everything about Jesus and if only people knew what you knew. Or if you're a Christian and you think that way. Sometimes you just need to be patient and let God do the job. And you just have to show up. You just have to exist. You have to feel things with people, because scriptures also say, rejoice with those who rejoice, but mourn with those who are mourning.
Yeah, like that is so good. And it reminds me of something I read online where there was this guy talking about a relationship with his girlfriend, and they got to the point where he would be like, do you want comfort or do you want solutions? And so, yeah, it ties completely back into that. Sometimes you just need to be that comforting person and then just, give it up to God to take over.
Yeah. Do you have anything that's floating in your mind before we wrap up? Anything that you feel like needs to be said to the people that want to help people or the people that are going through things?
No, nothing that I haven't already said. Just listen to your friends, be there for them, hold them accountable, and try to help them get better without forcing or making them feel like they have to.
Mm-hmm.
They've a person who, in order to get better, they have to make the decision to get better. So if you were trying to help and you were doing all you can and something still happens, it's not your fault. Like, they have to get to the point where they want it. So
Yeah.
just, that's my last little nugget, is if you're trying to help.
Yeah. And guys, if you've stuck with us through this, thank you for hanging out. I hope it helps you. I hope Tiffany's story has inspired you. I hope you were able to relate in some way. If this video has inspired you, helped you, if you think it could help somebody else, please like and share it so that it can get in front of more of these eyeballs.
Yeah.
But I just want to say we love you. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Awesome. Good job.